Hey everyone, Wyloch here, welcome back. Recently, Plaid, the company behind Folk Art, Mod Podge, and a lot of other products that we love, sent me a box of stuff to use and review. I thought I would take a look at all the technical paints that were in there, try them out on some of my projects, maybe retrofit, and give you my honest impressions of them. In a couple of months, Plaid will be releasing Mod Podge Ultra, and it comes in these spritzer bottles. I was wondering if they'd be a decent replacement for PVA glue and water to attach and seal tree leaf flocking. So, I took out some tree armatures, attached clumps of moss using hot glue, and then spritzed it till visibly soaked. Now I wanted to test both fine flocking and clump flocking, so I've got my homemade sawdust flock, as well as some leftover foam clump tree scatter from huge miniatures. Also, I'm curious what effect this will have on different shades. So I'm going to toss this on the tree. Don't really care about the final look here. What I'm interested in is adhesion and finish and color. So first, adhesion. After a day to dry, it looks good. A little spongy, but that's the case with PVA glue too. After the first application, everything sticks well and the vibrancy of the greens hasn't changed, which is a problem that I've had with PVA and water. So I doused it again, came back a day later, and voila, rock hard as expected. Colors look good too. So if you've tried to do trees and had a hard time getting your glue-water mixture just right, or just don't want to go to the hassle, this stuff might be a usable surrogate for you. Performs as I hoped it would. These are some flash paints. They're iridescent metallic, and they kind of change color with the angle of the light. Cool concept. I wasn't overly impressed with these, unfortunately. The coverage is very, very thin. I can't imagine how many coats it would take to brush up to a solid sheen. But for paints that are finicky with coverage, an airbrush sometimes eases the pain. And the blue one here caught my eye for potential use on Alpha Legion Space Marines, so I tried it out. One of these was applied over a gray base coat, and the other over a blue base coat. They do shimmer. It doesn't come through on camera, but they absolutely do have that color-changing metallic effect. I really had to feather it with the airbrush. It probably took about 10 light coats to get here. So, mixed bag. These glazes are interesting. They're used to make things look antique. I've always struggled to get a good sandstone, so I want to try this dark brown one. First I took a hunk of extruded polystyrene, then rolled it with some balled up aluminum foil to texturize, and then picked out some divots with pliers because the instructions say to let this stuff collect where it wants to. Important for the overall look. Then just 2 coats of linen, just a neutral light tannish brown sort of color. And then we're supposed to brush on the glaze, and then while wet, wipe off the excess, kind of like wood stain. It's got a weird oily texture to it. So I wipe off the excess, and yeah, the detail is accentuated. This isn't as rich a brown as I was hoping, but that's beside the point. What I'm looking for here is what this has done for the texture, understanding that I'm not using this for its intended purpose. It does fill surface divots. I think you could get the same results with a simple wash of watered down acrylic craft paint. I mean, I did back for the exterior stucco of the walls in episode 38 with the inn. So this performs as advertised, but I think for us terrain crafters, a wash will do just as well. Although I will say, this stuff is thick and oily and it doesn't run, so if you want to wash vertical surfaces and not have runnels of liquid, well, then there's a small advantage here. This 2-part kit right here is first of several. This is for moss, so there's a dark and a light green texture paint. So I took a dungeon tile and dabbed on some healthy splotches of the dark green, and then per the instructions, a few spots of the light green, so I aimed for like 50% coverage with it, and kind of used the brush to help mix the two in some spots. I also did one of my stone pillars. A few hours later, it's dry, and we get this. In my opinion, a very good result. Definitely sells as moss. I like it. I recommend this. Gets me excited for the concrete kit. So yeah, again, there's a light and a dark. I'm going to retro-treat the power station from episode 59. Remember we had this thing on a large cardboard rectangle, painted up to look like concrete. So let's try the texture paint. Again, dab it on, the light color, not stroke, but dab it on. Fairly healthy amount. And then I went back and dabbed with the dark gray, being more aggressive in some places, maybe twisting the brush to help the two mix in a few spots. About an hour later, and concrete. I went a little too heavy on the dark color. I should have used a lot less, maybe been more irregular with it, but the texture is good. Again, I like this. The granules might be a little large in scale for what I'm doing here with miniature terrain, but you definitely get what's advertised, which is a convincing concrete texture. And this has me very excited for the rust kit. There's a dark brown and a terracotta kind of orangey shade. I'm going to take one of the soup can tower sections that we just built in episode 115 for the modular industrial walkways. First I'll cover up those copper splotches that I put on and get back to straight gunmetal. And then, in truth, I played with this stuff before filming. I mean, I did that for all of this. And I did find that having a slightly damp brush, not soaked, but wringed out, helps the paint to be just runny enough to flow down a surface and give us runnels, which is just what I want. So I hit both ends with the dark color, and it kind of got away with me on the lower base, but that's okay. It looks like the tank is leaking or something. Very grim dark. And then the orangey color, again, dabbing in some random spots to complement. Here it is wet. And here it is a few hours later. Awesome. I am impressed with this. Easily my favorite of this whole batch of products. Easy way to take this terrain one level higher. No pun intended. And frosted glass. These are intended to be used on glass and baked. So on a scrap bit of glass I painted on a spectrum, just all the colors they sent me. This is it after one coat, pretty thin, so I let it dry, and here it is after 2 coats. Then into the oven. You're supposed to put it in with the oven cold, start a heat to 350, and bake at 350 for 30 minutes. And here it is after. It looks identical to before it went in, except that it's been cured, so it's really durable. I cannot scrape it off. I don't know, I expected it to be semi-transparent, but I can't even see through it. Maybe that's the intended look? I only did 2 thin coats and I let them dry an hour each, but I don't use real glass in my projects anyway. Not real crazy about how this came out. Maybe I used it wrong, not sure. So, final verdict. First we'll do the meh. So the frosted glass paints, not crazy about them. I don't use glass in my work anyway. The antique glazes, for terrain making, for what we do, a paint wash is just as good. And the flash paints, they're hard to use, tricky to get the effect right, but if you do, it looks great. And now the recommends. The Mod Podge Ultra Spray worked great for foliage. I like it. It's going to be a little more expensive than good old white glue and water, but I also found it to be noticeably more effective. Less flock falling off. And the Moss, Concrete, and Rust kits. My favorite of the bunch. Love them. Thanks for joining me. Here's some recommended viewing and a community showcase. I'll see you next time.